Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is Talking Politics with me, Dr. Brian Baker. This is episode 15 of our podcast as we are getting used to getting going and doing what we do here. I love to talk about things when it really matters. And if I don't have something to say, then it's better not to say anything at all. But boy, do I have something to say about my home state of Florida. There is a lot that's happened over the last couple of days. Back on Tuesday, we had some interesting results. And I say particularly when we look at the top of the ticket with the race for governor and for U.S. Senate. Okay, so we had the primaries for the Democrats and the Republicans. It's a closed primary in Florida for those who may not know. Okay, and so when we look at the results, and I'm going to pull up a few things here so we can see what happened. Byron Donalds, the Republican candidate. He will be the Republican nominee for governor for the general election come November, and he will be facing off against David Jolly, a former Republican who left the party and now is running as a Democrat who won the Democratic nomination on Tuesday. And that's going to shape up to be a very interesting race for the general election, because sometimes people assume, because Florida has leaned towards the Republicans, towards the right, that all of a sudden it's no longer a swing state. But that's not the actual case. I think that we need to go back and make sure that people understand what are the dynamics in Florida right now. What do we need to pay close attention to? Are there more Republicans in Florida, who's registered Republicans, I should say? The answer is yes. There, as of right now, you go to the Florida Division of Elections, you can go to the website. It's a government website. As of July 31st, 2026, voter registration by party affiliation, the Republican Party of Florida has 5,607,836 registered voters. Okay. The Democratic Party has 4,066,503 people who have registered as Democrats. Now, yes, does that mean there are more Republican registered voters in Florida than Democrats? Yes. But we also have to realize that for the minor parties, there's 497,679 people registered for a minor party, and there are 3,327,656 people who have no party affiliation, the independents. That is a huge number. When you talk about the total number of registered voters in the state of Florida as of July 31st, 2026, 13,499,674. The fact that only 5,607,836 are registered Republicans, if I were a Republican strategist, I would not be feeling comfortable about Byron Donalds going up against David Jolly, who is a former Republican. That is not an ideal situation. I know that some people might say, well, Byron Donalds has an opportunity to make history as the first black governor in the state of Florida. But as he is a registered Republican, obviously, he's a Republican nominee. That's not necessarily going to win him a lot of black votes, more than likely in Florida. Now, he won easily. Let's look at the results. I want to make sure that everyone's aware of this. He did win easily. Byron Donalds, he had received 810,802 votes in comparison to his closest rival, Jay Collins, at 426,847 votes. So Byron Donalds, he won the nomination pretty easily. The same can be said for David Jolly, who had 761,802 votes. And the next closest person, Dana Foster, had 189,288 votes. So David Jolly won 61% of the votes for the Democrats, and Byron Donalds won 47.8%. Because it's a closed primary, and the reason why I wanted to bring up those voter registration numbers, because it's a closed primary, those 3.3 million no party affiliation, or those 497,000 minor party affiliations, they didn't vote for either Byron Donalds or for David Jolly in the primary election on Tuesday. That's not what happened. So we're talking about essentially 3.8 million people, I'm just doing a little rounding, who didn't vote. Not yet. The general election is when everyone, it's a statewide race for governor and a statewide race for a U.S. Senate. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Now everyone gets to vote. And if I'm a Republican strategist, I would not be feeling comfortable knowing that now you're going to have nearly 5 million people who potentially could vote for someone who's not a Republican. That is reality. This idea that Florida is not a swing state, that is fool's gold. If you think that Florida is not a swing state because it has leaned Republican for, let's say, the last decade, you're not paying attention to, well, what happened before Donald Trump was president? If you recall, Barack Obama won Florida twice. So this idea that somehow Florida has become this heavy Republican ruby red state, that is not the truth at all. And we're going to find out come November where everyone lands. Because Byron Donalds, he has some opportunities to be exposed. There are some times where I think the thing with David Jolly, what he's going to do is probably find some holes and try to poke those holes and see. We'll see what happens come November. Now, the other thing that happened was the U.S. Senate race. Okay, so if you recall, Marco Rubio, who was a sitting U.S. senator, he became the Secretary of State for the Trump administration. And by giving up his Senate seat, you have Governor Ron DeSantis, who appointed Ashley Moody to be senator. But because there's still a couple of years, more than a couple of years left with the term that Marco Rubio had, there's a special election that's going to happen in November for the last 2 years of that Senate seat. And so Ashley Moody, she was able to win the nomination for the Republicans. Now, she did do that. So we got to give credit where credit is due. She did win the nomination for the Republicans as an incumbent, quote unquote. She wasn't elected, but she did win. What was surprising was the Democratic nominee, Angie Nixon. She won her race and she beat Alex Vindman. And because of her now beating Alex Vindman, by the way, Angie Nixon, who is well known in the Northeastern region especially, she is a state representative in Florida who has been doing that for about 6 years now. She's well known. She was outspent 16-1. She raised somewhere around $975,000 compared to Alex Vindman, who raised nearly 16 million, somewhere around there, $16 million. And she still won, which I'm sure that terrifies many of people in the Democratic establishment, the donor class. I'm sure that they are very concerned because if someone who had less than $1 million was able to win a nomination for a statewide race without having the backing of the establishment, not having this huge PAC money, that is sending a message to everyone loud and clear that people are tired of being tired and they're sick and tired of seeing all of the foolishness, whether it be from the establishment class, the donor class. People are fed up and they said, you know what, we're rolling with Angie Nixon, and she won convincingly. Okay, I want to make sure that we get those results here. Let me try to pull those up for you so that you can see what happened. I mean, she won by double digits. Okay, it wasn't even like a little bit. It was a lot. She easily won. And I think that we're going to have to pay close attention to what happened with Angie Nixon moving forward over the next few months. And how is that going to play out? Can she win? Can she beat Ashley Moody? I would say so. I would say that she's more than capable of beating Ashley Moody because she has something that Ashley Moody doesn't have, and that is ground support. And that is very important to have ground support. She has a ground game. Okay, some people talk about that. A ground game, because you got to have a ground game if you don't have even $1 million of raised funds, but you're still able to beat someone that has $16 million of funds that they had acquired. So what does that mean moving forward for the top of the ticket when we look at U.S. governor, U.S. Senate, and we look at Florida governor? We have uncertainty in this election. That's really the thing that I want you to think about. There is uncertainty in the Florida election for the first time in a while, because I honestly couldn't tell you as a Floridian. I don't know how it's going to go. Now, some people might say, well, it's going to be an uphill battle for Angie Nixon to actually win the statewide race. And is she electable and all of those things? Well, clearly she was electable enough to where people felt like they should give her a shot. Ashley Moody, I'm not even going to lie, being in Florida, and I know she is currently one of our senators. I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I know what her voice sounds like. To be honest with you, I don't know if I could, if you had pointed her out in the crowd, I don't know if I would be able to point her out because, yeah, I really don't know what she's been up to. And that's no shot at her. That's just reality. And there are a lot of voters that probably are feeling the same way, like, well, I don't even know what she has accomplished since she has been in office. I know that she was appointed by the governor, but what does she actually stand for? Now, like I said, I wanted to give you some results here. All right, so Angie Nixon, she received 690,172 votes compared to Alex Vindman, who had 543,688 votes. Now, you look at the total votes, 1.2 million, 1,233,860 people voted in the primary. That's a lot. That's not the independents. That's not the minor parties. That is the people who are registered Democrats. And there are more than 4 million registered Democrats in the state of Florida. And only 25% of them actually showed up for the primary. So what will that look like come the general election? Hopefully everyone votes, because that's the thing that we want to continue to share with everybody. Everyone needs to vote. If you don't like what you're seeing, if you don't like the things that are happening in Washington, you don't like the people that are representing you as a U.S. senator or as a member of the House of Representatives, if you don't like what the governor is doing, you better get up and vote. Because it may come down to a handful of votes. And I think it's going to be a tight race, to be honest with you, for the governorship and for the Senate. I think it's going to be a tight race. It's going to be a lot closer than people think. Because now there are some formidable candidates on the Democratic side. And I got to be honest with you, I don't think necessarily that there are strong Republican candidates. I'm not saying that they're not known in Republican circles, but I don't know if they're necessarily going to pick up some of those votes that they may be hoping for. Because you got to look at a few things. Let's make sure we have the breakdown of what it looks like in Florida, because when you have policies and things like that, we need to know who's impacted. Who are the people that are impacted in the state of Florida? All right, so just to give you some demographics, and we can check this in other places and fact check this, but I wanted to use race and ethnicity demographics because I think it's very, very important for us to pay close attention to who are the people actually living in Florida. All right, if we start looking at race and ethnicity. Now, let me see if I can find something that's a little more up to date back in 2020 census, but I would like to see something a little more up to date. And I'm just going to pull up one more thing for you here. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. When you look at, and there's a couple of places you can go, and I want you to fact check this for yourself. Some have estimates for this year where the number of people living in Florida, population demographics by race, you're talking about 55.9% identify as white, 15.1% identify as black or African American. You have 2.9% as Asian. You have, when it comes to two or more races, 19.4%. And you also have, and depending on which one you're looking at, somewhere around 26% Latino residents make up about 27.4% of the total population. Well, that's pretty significant. This idea that it's just going to be a walk in the park for Republicans, that's pretty significant, especially considering what's happened with, you're talking about temporary protective status for Haitians, for Venezuelans, what's going down South Florida, what is happening with them. And of course, we know historically, black people, black voters are not voting Republican. They're just not in massive numbers. And I don't think that's going to change with Byron Donalds just because he's black. And that's going to be one of those things I think people need to pay close attention to. Just because the Republican candidate is black doesn't mean that black voters are going to vote for him. I would argue that they probably are not. because he is very much aligned with Donald Trump. Donald Trump endorsed him, and I don't think that Donald Trump is necessarily a fan favorite among many people in the black community. We know based on the 2024 election that 92% of black women did not vote for Donald Trump, and more than 78% of black men who voted did not vote for Donald Trump. And I don't think that being a Trump endorsed person on the top of the ticket is necessarily going to move the needle for black voters. We've got to think about that. I don't think much has changed in that regard. If anything, those poll numbers that we've seen for President Trump, they haven't been great as of late. And I don't think that's going to change much. Many people are concerned in the state of Florida about the cost of living, the cost of fuel, the cost of housing, property taxes increasing. Is it still affordable to even live here? As someone who has lived here most of my life, I can say things are much more expensive than they used to be. And people aren't happy. So I think there are a number of factors, and I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if David Jolly wins his race and Angie Nixon wins her race. I wouldn't be surprised. For those who may not know about Angie Nixon, she is a Jacksonville native. And that's the other thing that people sometimes don't realize. Jacksonville is not only the largest city in the state of Florida land-wise, it is also the most populous city in the state of Florida. So just because it doesn't get the shine as, say, a Miami, it doesn't mean that Miami is bigger than Jacksonville. In fact, Jacksonville is much bigger than Miami and has way more people living in it than Miami. And she is from the largest city in the state and the most populous city in the state. And she has a tremendous amount of support in the northern region of the state. Not to say that she doesn't have support elsewhere, but it is a good foundation to have if you're running for a statewide race, to be from the largest city and the most populous city and people like you. That is a good start. So I wouldn't be surprised if Angie Nixon actually wins the general election. There will be more to come on that in the next few months. We will see what happens, but it will be interesting with this Florida general election now that we know who are the candidates moving forward. At the top of the ticket, especially, we need to pay close attention to what's going on in Florida and see whether or not Angie Nixon and David Jolly can actually do something that others didn't think could be done. And for one final note, too, to the Democratic establishment, leadership, wherever they may be, where are you? That is the question I have right now. As someone who has seen a lack of investment by the Democratic Party in Florida, where are you? You have now sent shockwaves around the country because Angie Nixon has done something that no one thought she could do. Now's the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to support her and give her the investments that she needs in order to compete against someone who's an incumbent. Or have they already forfeited anything that they want to do from a competitive side and just said, we'll just see what happens? I submit to you that there has been a lack of investment by the Democratic establishment in the state of Florida. I have seen it, the absence of their presence. Now, Nikki Fried is trying to do everything she can as the chair for the Democratic Party here in Florida to make things right and to get things better, and she needs some help. And I don't think that there are many leaders in the established Democratic Party who have put forth much effort to help people in the state of Florida, even though it is the third most populous state in the union, even though, as we just talked about, there are not only 4 million Democratic voters in the state of Florida, but there's also more than 3 million independents in the state of Florida. And even if you don't think that they can win, well, you definitely won't win if you don't try. So just saying, you might want to try to do something about that if you want to have a Democrat for president. I mean, I don't know about you, but those are a lot of electoral votes for the Electoral College that I wouldn't want to give up. The third most populous state in the union, more than 23 million people live in the state of Florida, more than 12 million registered voters in the state of Florida total. I think that you might want to actually do some investments in the state of Florida if you want to have any shot of winning the White House back back in 2028. But we will talk more about that because I got a lot of smoke for the leaders of the established Democratic Party. They got a lot of things that they need to work on moving forward towards this general election. Where are you? That is the question that we will talk about moving forward. Nevertheless, I just wanted to let you know this is what's going on in my state, my home state, and I believe that it's going to be a very interesting part of whether or not the Democrats take back the House and the Senate when it comes to later on in November. There's a lot that's going to happen moving forward. Stay tuned. We'll be in touch again. Again, talking politics with me, Dr. Brian Baker. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and we will be back together again soon. And I look forward to talking about politics in the coming months.